What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a bit of a surprise video in the form of an expansion for Diablo 2 that came 25 years after its release. And while it was a surprise to me at the very least, I'm not sure if it was literally a surprise, as I don't keep up a ton with what Blizzard is doing these days, but I do love Diablo 2, and so naturally this immediately had my attention. Now, I initially saw that they had added a new class to Diablo 2 Resurrected, and while they did in fact do that, they also added a bunch of other stuff worth talking about as well, and while I wouldn't say this is of the size of something like Lord of Destruction as an example, this is still a sizable update, and if you want to play it yourself, it's going to cost you about $25 on top of what Diablo 2 Resurrected will cost you, or you can buy them bundled together in the Infernal Edition. And what you get for that is the Warlock class, updated terror zones, a whole bunch of items to coincide with the Warlock class for the most part, alongside some, I would say, very welcome quality of life changes, if anything. But let's talk about the most important stuff first. Obviously, the Warlock is the big thing here, and I will say straight away, I was surprised by how well I thought this class kind of fit in with the overall lineup. However, mechanically, it does seem to be somewhere in between like a necromancer and a druid in particular. The reason for this being that a lot of what it does is focus on either casting and or summoning in demons, and even its melee abilities are not that far off from like how the shapeshift attacks function, even if visually it's obviously very different. That said, your Chaos skill tree is your caster skill tree. If you want to be a caster throwing out hellfire and things at enemies, that's the way to go there. The Eldritch tree takes advantage of the Warlock's unique levitation ability, so the Warlock gets something of class passive, if you will, where they levitate their melee weapons, and what this does functionally is allow them to use a two-handed melee weapon in one hand via this levitation, while they then have their offhand on top of that, which theoretically should open them up to have some unique melee-oriented builds, which is the gameplay you're seeing here. I was kind of messing around with that myself. But as with all other classes, the Warlock gets some unique items that only they can use, primarily in the form of grimoires. Various books they can use that will add elemental damage to their attacks, alongside, of course, potentially having the ability to rank up your Warlock skills. That is in addition to them adding Warlock stats onto both daggers and staves. That said, it wouldn't be a ton of fun if that's all they got in terms of items, because this is, at the end of the day, a game about chasing down loot and powering up, and so we have a whole bunch of items specifically added to help the Warlock out. This comes in the form of 2 new sets for the Warlock, alongside unique items tailored to them as well, and of course new rune words. Now I will say the rune words, at least the easier ones to get a hold of towards the beginning, would probably be good early game, but I do think they falter in comparison to some tried and true stuff like stealth or smoke in the mid-game level up range. That said, I was not able to test out every single Warlock rune word, as I didn't have the runes to do so personally, so I don't know entirely where they fall on the power spectrum, but the ones I was messing around with seem like they would be good for a Warlock in the early game at least. So we've got the class, the items to support said class, well, what else? Well, the big thing here, in my opinion, is the Chronicle and the quality of life changes. So what the Chronicle does is allow you to just straight up track all of the various items that are hard to get, that being unique, sets, as well as the various rune words you can craft. This is a convenient way to keep them all sort of organized in a way that is easily accessible. In particular, this is a place you can look up the rune words you have made, and it'll just tell you the rune combination in case you forget, as there are a lot of them. And then if you actually manage to complete the various subcategories here, they apparently give you some cosmetic stuff for Resurrected as well. On the quality of life side of things, this namely has to do with the stash tabs. So prior to this, you had a personal stash and a shared stash you could give between your characters and everything as part of Resurrected, I believe. But this one, in particular, Reign of the Warlock, introduces resource tabs where you can just throw all of your gems and runes where they'll automatically be organized and kept for you without taking up any further space, and it will also transfer in between your characters as well, acting as a shared tab. I thought that was especially handy because, as you would know if you've played this game for any length of time, you're going to be drowning in gems and runes and everything else, and this offers a very convenient way to store that stuff without taking up precious space that can be spent with your hard-earned loot. However, all that loot and class abilities, etc. wouldn't be complete without something to actually do with all of it, and that's where the updated terror zones come in. So in the end game, there will be a rotation of terror zones across the different acts of the game, and basically what this does is spikes the difficulty in certain zones within each of the acts. Completing those zones will potentially lead you to a terror boss for each one. Those terror bosses will all drop statues, and if you get all 5 of the statues, one for each act, you can combine them to then face off against a new Uber boss, which just seems to be a variation of the 3 ancients from Mount Arreat. And then, of course, they drop new loot, in particular unique jewels, I believe is what they said, something you can track down for those guys. So not only do we have a new class, new items, new quality of life stuff, they also gave you a few things to chase down as well, if that's your cup of tea. And content-wise, that's basically what this $25 DLC will get you. But from there, I want to talk a little bit on the opinion side. As I mentioned towards the beginning of the video, probably the most interesting thing about this to me is that they managed to add a class to this older game that actually feels like it fits in. Now, some of that is in the form of the way the Warlock gets their power. They are essentially forcing hell to do their bidding, which, if you know anything about the Diablo sort of universe here, is a dangerous thing to do, as it would likely be in any franchise, but this one in particular. But having a character that is directly manipulating things and summoning demons, that kind of thing, certainly fits in here, but I do think they got the tone of like the abilities and the art of it to, for the most part, fit in with Diablo 2, which is notoriously a bit more gritty than some of the more recent stuff they've been working on. But it also helps that, again, mechanically, this feels like a combination between Druid and Necromancer with like the summons and the way it augments their melee and the casting abilities of it. And it just so happens that those are 2 of my favorite Diablo 2 classes, and so kind of mixing and matching them this way feels fun to mess around with on top of all that. And then the quality of life stuff was very welcome. And so, while I almost find it a bit shocking to say, Blizzard actually did something with the Diablo franchise that I've enjoyed. And I plan on, in my own time, though probably not anytime soon as I am very busy at the moment, to continue playing more of this and messing around with this class. That said, let's assume you're not up for any of this. Well, the nice thing about the way Resurrected is set up is that you can still play the original version with the original graphics, even if that's your thing. But in particular, when you go to create a character, you can now pick an era, as they call it, which is the original game, the expansion, Lord of Destruction era, and then this new Reign of the Warlock era. What this does is allow you to create a character that has the features from the time in which that era was relevant. Again, base game expansion or the new Reign of the Warlock, and it'll have like the items and everything all set up for you. And what's actually really cool about that is that it's on a per character basis, meaning that if you want to keep your expansion characters and not have them move on to this new sort of expansion situation, you can totally keep them as expansion characters only. However, I do want to point out, because it took me a minute to sort of figure this out, they do have the separate stash tabs and everything separated by those eras as well. So if you move your characters forward to the Reign of the Warlock era, what that's actually going to do is keep your items that are in your shared tab and everything in the older version where they are. So you'll have to make another character to go retrieve them, move them to their inventory, transfer that character to the Reign of the Warlock era, and then kind of throw them in the stash that way. So do keep that in mind if you want to mess around with that. I was a little concerned at first that I had lost some items, but it just turned out that I had left them in the previous era because they were in the shared stash of that era. But to start wrapping this up, kind of much to my own surprise, really, I'm actually enjoying this. And while I have yet to see how this class performs in the in-game, as it simply hasn't been long enough for me to have tested all of that just yet, this seems promising, and I'm genuinely excited to play more of this for myself when I get the opportunity to do so. But by all means, let me know what you guys think about it down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.